Yeah, where is it?
It's over here. Follow me.
It's a very simple image. That,
There
hi,
you
everybody.
Hi, David.
We are here. We're all here all the time. Everywhere we go, there we are. Doing so many things in the here and now. But it's so this week I had this incredible experience, which was actually 2 weeks ago, and I did post it on Facebook, but Facebook is a bit of a mess. And to me, it's kind of a hilarious place because you see what people gravitate towards. They definitely like the most drama. Um, if something's not dramatic, people are not that interested in it. But okay, this particular experience, and I'm going to go to a screen share because this is what I saw. I was holding my staff at a very particular frequency, which is the longest hypotenuse in the Ark of the Covenant. So I calculated the frequency of the longest hypotenuse of the Ark of the Covenant, which happens to be the exact height of my wife, Crystal, who's the mother of my children. And which is really ironic that it's really quite, it's exact. And so, of course, if you understand that in the Bible, in the book of Hebrews, that the staff of Aaron, which is the same as the staff of Moses and the 12 staff of the 12 tribes, lay in the Ark of the Covenant. It can either lay this way, lengthwise. It can lay this way, which is hypotenuse number one. And if it's a short stubby thing, it can lay this way, but the longest hypotenuse is corner to corner in the box shape. And so that frequency is what I was doing, just so you know. I haven't given out that frequency yet. It's a master frequency. And first we train, we do the people with the staffs, and you're going to learn how to do this with your bed system or even your coil system. Put high frequencies through those devices. We're not there yet. But you're going to learn how to do that. But first you have to get an actual high frequency device, which is on the website. So basically what happened, before I go to screen share, is it looked just like a regular near-death experience. I woke up in the middle of the night, my kids are sleeping. I meditate for an hour with the staff, and then I go back to bed. And then this happens very quickly. In fact, this is a great technique for everybody to understand, is when we first fall asleep with total exhaustion, the mind goes down with the body. So when the body is exhausted and the mind is exhausted, if the mind goes down with the body, we tend to dream in the astral plane.
David, did you want to screen share?
I'm not there yet. Yeah, I will. But can you enable it?
You should have it. I just wanted to make sure.
No, you have to. It's still disabled. This is disabled. So what happens in that moment when you get up in the middle of the night, even though it's really tough sometimes, or something may call you to wake up in the middle of the night. And probably the best thing you can do in the middle of the night is sit on a cushion and meditate. And because what it does is it drains all the blood out of the head, and that groggy, unconscious dream state goes away. And with that, there's clarity. And what happens to me is my third eye, or my inner eye, gets very bright, and all of these incredible luminous geometries start just spontaneously emerging in the light. And the colors are spectacular. They're out of this world. And of course, I'm not using any drugs or plant-based medicine. I'm just working with the frequencies and doing the meditation. So I leave my body, and it looks literally like a classic near-death experience, right? Like this, except there were no stairs and there's no clouds. there's the tunnel, and I'm going into the light, and the light is God. There's no person. It's infinitely intelligent, and of course it knows me, and it knows you, it knows all of us. And so this is the most amazing experience I've had with the light, because it communicates to me what the light does at the time of death, and some of us may know a person or be connected to a person who has died of the COVID situation. And of course, usually when a person dies of COVID, there's many other factors and health problems associated with that person's death. I just got news this morning that my good friend Marty, whose dad was the general manager of the Denver Avalanche hockey team, died. It's posted on the NHL website right now. And he was only 72, and he called me for advice about, his dad, and without going into advice, because I can't give it, he died, and he's only 72, which is too young. And it's actually incredible, because what happened to my friend Marty, a very good friend of mine, is he was with child with his wife, and his wife to be was one of my best friends in Los Angeles. And I won't name her, it's not important. But I was with this woman during the last stages of her pregnancy. And she was so terrified of survival. Are they going to make it? Are they going to be able to be parents and take care of the baby? She was terrified. And this terror overwhelmed her. And we don't know if that caused the problem, but the baby was born premature and died in Los Angeles, California. And Marty had this incredible mystical experience where his son appeared above the bed in the light. And he said he came out of it looks just like the classic shape of a flying saucer, but it's made of pure light. It wasn't a flying saucer, but it was like an oval. And his son appeared to him. It's almost like the movie 2001 and 10, A Space Odyssey. This little boy appeared to him and just blinded him with love and showed him, you know, that he loved him as his dad, and he chose him as his dad. But then he didn't get to live, right? And so as I'm going into the light this time, God is showing me that all of us carry positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative charges. So if you imagine yourself approaching the light is so high in frequency, so high in pure positivity. And it looks at each of us, and we have positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negatives. And if we have more positives than negatives, we start to go up into the light. And if we have more negatives than positives, we see the light, but we're having a really hard time letting go. And you can look in your life, you can see your whole life in this light. You can see everything that happened to you. In fact, many people will say, but so many bad things happened to me. And I'm one of those people. I could say the same thing. So many bad things have happened to me. But I attained the bliss state, which is absolute positivity. See, the first thing to understand is the light in the bliss and the love in the bliss are one. They're not separate. And to go into that state, which is every one of our birthrights, we have to become positive. And it's funny to me because when I think of the law of attraction, and you have to visualize what you want and make what you want a positive and draw yourself towards it. But meanwhile, you're sitting in a sea of doubt, conflict, negativity. Should I do this or should I do that? And this is just the beginning, you see. This state where we start of trying to attract what we want, trying to heal the body of disease with frequency, trying to use frequency to manifest what we want. And one of the things is when you're in the presence of frequencies, whatever you're thinking is going to multiply millions of times. So if you can't hold a positive thought and then you go to negative, the negative is going to amplify as well. And this is an interesting thing because when William Tiller, and of course, we sent you Quantum Communication Part 1 and 2, which I hope you saw because the work of William Tiller in that film is spectacular. William Tiller, Dr. Tiller was in What the Bleep Do We Know? But that you probably missed this because a very subtle fact is when William Tiller did the experiments where they put a glass of water 6,000, 7,000 miles away from the intention. The intention was to positively raise the pH of the water, the pH balance of the water. So if water is normally sitting at, rainwater is quite acidic. So you could take rainwater, which might have a pH of 5, and then you want to raise it up. And so this is the problem, is they couldn't find meditators that could hold a positive thought indefinitely. And that's because we go from positive to negative, positive to negative. And I laugh when people tell me, oh, the myth of Adam and Eve when they took in the knowledge of positive and negative, good and evil, same thing, is a myth. And I said, no, it's right inside your mind every day. You can see it's there. The evidence that it's there is so clear because The entire world is judgment, good and evil. Republicans versus the Democrats, right, is a classic manifestation. And the current election madness is, my candidate's good and yours is evil. That's it, right? So we identify egoically with our side versus the other side. And that's the nature of a football game. It's also the nature of a battlefield, a real battlefield where people are killed. But the positive negative in the experiment with William Tiller was so erratic, even in a good meditator. What he had to do is they were able to record a positive intention in fruit fly larvae. It's called an IIED, which is an actual device. Isn't that amazing? A fruit fly could hold a positive thought, and you're swatting those fruit flies, right? They're getting around your banana. They won't leave your banana alone.
Melanogaster is the name. Drosophila melanogaster is the name of this fruit fly.
Right. So the fact is that we can't hold a pure positive thought, and that's because our positivity, even our positivity, has negativity in it. And that's because as souls, when we came in here, believe it or not, we wanted to decide for ourselves what is good and evil. And so with good and evil, just put the positives and negatives, and you have to do this as an exercise inside yourself. And just look at what are your doubts and write them down. What are all your doubts in your life? What did you want to experience, even physically, even sensually, and you didn't because you might have thought somebody's judging me, it's immoral or moral, right? So whatever, you just go down the list, go through each one of your chakras, right? Did I speak and communicate to people what I wanted to manifest? The funniest thing is you can't manifest anything in this world without communicating. So we communicate with our voice, but it's not just our voice, it's what we resonate when we communicate. Can we speak what we want with positivity to the other person or people? What we want out of them? Can we do that? And can we engage them into our vision of what we want to collectively manifest, right? Like, I can say as a father, I want to manifest for the young generation, total affordable housing, so that young people can start having children again in their 20s instead of in their 30s and 40s, which is what the phenomenon today is, because 20-year-olds don't have any money. And we have a baby shortage in North America. Forgetting the rest of the world's overpopulation problem, we're talking about North America because that's where we live. There is an actual crisis. Americans and Canadians are not having babies. They're not having anywhere near enough. And we're about to lose up to 30% of the population very suddenly due to many causes, because we're in an aging population right now. So that's one of the things I talk about on Facebook. When I post it there, nobody seems that concerned or interested. So, again, I think that's kind of funny because what they really like is drama. So coming to your positive and negatives, you need to do this as an exercise. Go through whatever age you are right now, go through each one of your chakras and write down, what did you want to experience in your life that you didn't? And then look at why you didn't. Look at the opportunities that were presented to you that you rejected. And when you reject a positive experience that you wanted for yourself, ask yourself why. Did you think God was going to judge you if you had that experience? And the funny thing is, as you're going into the light, God doesn't actually care. That's all substratum, completely tiny stuff. God is so high in it's ultra positive. And the ultra positive of the first heaven and the second heaven and the third heaven and so on is so high that each heaven becomes 1,000,000 times more positive than the previous heaven. In fact, there is no negativity at all. But negativity on this plane happens. Guess why? Guess why certain people have horrible things happen to them? Because God is saying you're ready to get out of being identified with the idea that those things are going to give you fulfillment. And I know, God knows they're not. God knows your soul has been dwelling in those realms, thinking it's going to give you positivity, and it isn't. But you're hanging in there. And so God's going to allow things to happen to you to knock you out so you release, and you're on this platform and you think, oh my God, this horrible thing happened to me. Tell your friends all about it. Everybody has compassion for each other. And the compassion is good, because compassion is love. Compassion bonds us out of our selfish nature. And it's the beginning of coming out of the suffering. But the suffering isn't caused by God at all. And it's innate in the strata that you're hanging out in. So in this physical dimension, if you listen to every sensation of the body, if you have a negative sensation of the body, like watch a child. I watch my children every day, a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old. And boy, can they get high. Woo, children, the tone and the frequency of their voice can get super high with pure joy. But the second a child hurts themselves, they come right back down and they're crying their eyes out. And then you have all this love for your child. And then all of a sudden they're better. And then they'll get super high again. And I've even noticed in my children when they're getting really high, and when they get high, the house is a mess. They break stuff, stuff that you love, and you just let it go. Like, you got to let it go because they broke it. It's not there anymore. Do you find yourself, when you break something you love, does it pull you way down, right? So as you're going into the light, believe it or not, even the small stuff, the bad stuff that happened to you can pull you down. And God's like, I want you to be happy. I want you to be in the light. I want you to be super high in this ultra. See, negatives occur so that eventually ultra positivity is born. And this is an experiment in quantum mechanics, quantum physics. If I take a container, a vessel made of metal, and I trap an electron in there and put a lid on it, the electron bounces around like crazy. It can't get out. Guess what it does? It will quantum tunnel through the wall and generate a faster than light signal. So light travels at this speed, 186,282 miles per second, right? But when you trap it, it quantum tunnels and goes faster than light, which is super positivity, because light is, in physics, light is positive. So in my book, Singularity, I talk about this. I call this Adam, as in Adam and Eve, Adam's atom. If you go, the consciousness is so powerful, and I took this on in the voice and quantum communication. If consciousness, according to Dr. Tiller, is more powerful than all the matter in the material universe, then it's telling the matter what to do. And the mind is chaotic, good and evil, judgment, this is good, this is bad, my side's right, your side's wrong, this is going on all the time. And it doesn't ever stabilize until you reach equanimity of mind, until you can sit there and see it operating in yourself. When you're meditating, you're studying yourself, you're knowing yourself in your current level of spiritual development. And you got to ask yourself, do I believe this stuff? Do I really believe I'm right and the other person's wrong? Do I absolutely believe it? And is it is it a deal breaker, basically, to go forward in this either friendship, love affair, business relationship, whatever is it? You have to decide. But the positive, negative is going down here. And actually our little positives that we think are positives are really merely us becoming attracted to something else. So coming back to Adam's atom. So our bodies are made of atoms. And those atoms could be anything on the periodic table: gold, silver, copper, calcium, which is most of what we are. We talked about this earlier. And trace minerals, hydrogen, oxygen, which is water. We're actually mostly water while we're living, but it doesn't have a lot of real dense volume. If I compressed all the water in the body, it would fit it, you know, it would fit a very small amount of space if I separated the oxygen and the hydrogen from each other. So the bottom line is we're made of atoms. The atoms are made of different things. They're different elements. So you can have a gold, silver, copper, zinc atom. But these atoms are positive and negative, because we have the proton, which is positive in the nucleus, and the neutron is neutral, sits in the middle. And the neutron is almost more massive than the proton. And then the electrons are negative. And electrons travel like planets around the central nucleus, the way planets travel around stars. They travel in these orbits, or different radial, they call them shells. Shells are the little tracks that they oscillate around in. And they jump around incredibly randomly. They're not traveling in these nice uniform orbits. So we're positive and negative is what I'm saying. The good and evil, positive and negative, is on every single subatomic particle, every single one of them. So when you use a particle accelerator and smash the atom to pieces, you find muons, anti-muons, taus, anti-taus, neutrino, anti-neutrino, and even, I mean, the names of the subatomic particles, there's a huge list. And I studied this in great detail. I really wanted to know how subatomic particles really worked. Everything's positive and negative. Electron, positron, proton, antiproton. And then Murray Gell-Mann, who is a wonderful physicist, an incredible guy, and I got to meet him several times. He's the discoverer of quarks. And the quarks are the subcomponents of the neutron and the proton. They're all up, down, positive and negative charge. So the evidence of the knowledge of good and evil is in Adam's atom. So nobody can tell you it didn't happen. It happened on a fundamental spiritual level, and consciousness told the atoms what to do, to be chaotic in negative and positive. So how do we come to real positivity? And as I'm going into the light, as I'm going into God, God is showing me how many positive and negative charges I have. And God is actually hilarious. You may not realize this, but God has the ultimate sense of humor. See, we get mad. We say, you know, this horrible stuff happened to me, and that's why I can't be positive. No, I'm laughing because I've had these horrible things happen to me throughout my life. And I don't need to go into them all. There's too many of them. And they're there so that we become ultra positive. You may not realize it, but those negatives are there so you become ultra positive. And you eventually will. Eventually, everyone will. Because you can't hang on to this stuff forever. You just can't. I don't care what happened to you. You can't hang on to it. And the message of Christ with the nails in his wrist after he was totally massacred by the Roman centurions, blood coming out of every corner of his body. He's completely blissed out. If you read the Acts of John, which were banned by Pope Leo the Great, one of the greatest pieces of Christian literature, it's almost like the movie The Life of Brian. Jesus is dancing with the apostles in a circle, and he's about to be arrested and massacred. They're terrified. They're all in doubt. Oh my God, what they're going to do to you, Master, what they're going to do to you, Rabbi. And he's like, don't worry about a thing. Every little thing's going to be all right. And they're terrified. And he's having them dance in this circle. And I'm certain the circle was a Holy of Holies circle. And it's really wonderful to read the Acts of John. And of course, we know what happened. But what we don't know is in the Acts of John is when Christ had the nails in his wrists or hands, he was so positive. He's God. He's God realized. He's so blissed out. He's saying, forgive them, Lord. They don't know what they're doing. And for him to say that means he's exactly what he tells John on the cross. John is crying his eyes out watching his master's body massacred. He runs up to the cave on the Mount of Olives and he goes into the cave. And Christ appears to him as a cross of white. And this actually happened to me in the years that Christ was appearing to me in person in this blinding light form. On my altar, I had in my yurt, because I lived in a yurt, Christ would only appear to me in person when I lived in that yurt in Topanga, California, right next to the Inn of the Seventh Ray. And I had on my altar this picture of Christ on the table. And my yurt was big. The ceilings were, I mean, these ceilings are 10 feet. Those ceilings were easily 10 feet. And it was probably 14 feet by 10 feet, that yurt. And on the ceiling was a reflection off the shiny picture of Christ of a dancing crucifix. It looks like a cross, but it had all these beautiful dancing kind of lines in it. And I took a picture of that. I have that picture still to this day. And I was on a mission to find out, what is the message, Jesus? What is the dancing cross? Well, the answer was in the Acts of John. In the Acts of John, Jesus appears as a cross of white in the cave, and he tells John, I'm suffering none of the things they will say of me. None of the things. So there he is, completely massacred and bloody, and he's got nails in his wrists, and he's saying every little thing's going to be all right. Jesus is God in the flesh. He's realized God in the flesh. So when you realize you're 100% God, there's so much bliss. And in fact, I've seen evidence of this. There's this incredible piece of Christian mysticism. It's called the Abbé Paris, and it was in Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe. And The Holographic Universe is one far out book, but there's facets that Michael Talbot misses. Is that when you are no longer identified with the positives and negatives, the little tiny positives and negatives, and for us, those little positives are a big deal because our survival may be at stake. And so we want to manifest the positives in our life, right? And so we need to apply the law of attraction. We need to be totally focused and totally positive about what it is we're trying to manifest. But don't hold it tight. Give the positive, more than just thinking positive, your love. So back to Christ on the cross is Pope Leo the Great got a hold of the Acts of John, and the council, the first council at Nicaea and the second council at Nicaea got a hold of the Acts of John, and they say Christians are not going to read this. There's no way they're going to read this. We need a suffering Jesus. We need them to feel sorry for what happened to Christ. We need them to feel tremendous remorse and guilt and shame so that we can control them. We can't have this laughing Jesus on the cross. This is absurd. But the Abbé Paris, which is what I was going into, is this particular priest, on the anniversary of his death every year, this was done in France, is the participants would run swords through their stomach, nails through their hands, and they didn't even bleed. They felt no pain at all. And it's incredible. You can read about the Abbé Paris. It's every year on the anniversary of death. This went on for years. This phenomenon would occur, which to me is evidence to support the acts of John. That in this super illuminated state, there you don't perceive this body. You don't perceive sensations the way we do. Yes, the body has the sensation, but when you're fully absorbed in the pure ultra positivity of God, you don't actually feel it. Now, I saw this on an NBC News report. It was like the show 2020, and this is back in the 80s. And there was this Islamic event that occurs in the Middle East, and this news reporter went there, and during this particular celebration, the Muslims did the same thing. They could run swords through their arm, their shoulder blade, and they even could beat themselves, and they didn't feel anything. There's no pain. And so they, in this energy field of this event, this news reporter put a needle through his hand. He was too scared to put a sword, so he put a little needle. He was terrified to do it. He didn't feel a thing. I saw this news report with my own eyes. He didn't feel anything. And the reason this is important and what we're talking about today is, you see, the child will cry their eyes out because they know how to get super high, super positive, but they haven't mastered not reacting to the negative. Right. And then you could say, yeah, I see from Monica, when the saints were burned at the stake, like Joan of Arc, it's the same thing. It's actually the same thing. They reach the point where their illumination is so ultra positive, there's nothing negative that can touch them anymore. There's nothing negative that can touch them anymore. And so what it means to raise our frequency and to do the step training to go higher and higher in frequency is that, and what Valerie Hunt found, if she could get a person up to 250,000 hertz, that they were gonna have a mystical experience. And we're going higher than that. We're identifying the frequencies of the temples, which are in the millions of waves per second, as opposed to trying to approach 1 million waves per second. And what starts to happen is ultimately you come to this point, and we're all coming to this point because all of us are going to have our physical bodies die. When the physical body dies, we don't want to go down with its sensation of going down. And the moment we release from the body, the light will come for every one of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everybody. And the question is this, as you're coming forward, and this is this is realizable in the here and now, and this is realizable after death. But after death is the most important point, is to let all those resentments go and identify with that which you truly are, which is the light. And you'll see it. There's a reason Dante called it the Divine Comedy. He called the whole thing a comedy, because when you finally get it, that your suffering is caused by this over-obsessive identification with our little positive and negatives. Our positives are so tiny, but we need them. And I'm not laughing at them. I need them just like everybody else. I need money and manifestation just like everybody else. I'm raising, 2 kids and a wife who's in an altered state of consciousness all the time, which started about 5 years ago. And so I've got 3 dependents. And so, yeah, believe me, I can't fail. I hear you on the physical plane. And believe me, I see my own positive and negatives just like you do. When things are going great, it's great. But I can tell you this in my own personal experience, well, probably the most challenging, difficult, horrible thing that's ever happened to my family occurred every day. And this occurred even when we were traveling, trying to get my wife close to her family back in Sedona, Arizona, because we had moved to Canada. Every day when I meditated, the light and the bliss was blinding. And meanwhile, there were horrible things happening. It was terrifying to me what was going on. And I'm saying, God, why? Why? Every day there's so much bliss and there's so much light when I meditate. I say, it doesn't make any sense. Look what's happening in my life. And see, that's the message. The message is, believe me, when you start to get truly enlightened, the dark forces know it, and they don't like a person waking up. They don't like a person waking up. And when a person wakes up, and are you awake when you know what the dark forces are doing on the planet? No, you're knowledgeable of what the dark forces are doing on the planet. And the dark forces who are doing these things on the planet and have succeeded for millennia. You know, when Jesus meets Satan after in his 40-day, fast in the desert alone, and Satan tells him he controls everything in the world, just bow down and worship me and I'll give you anything you want. First of all, Satan is a liar. He's not going to give you anything you want. Just wants you to fall down and worship him. But those things of the world will not give you happiness. They will not give you bliss. They will give you temporary satisfaction. And satisfaction is not bliss. Once you experience even a tiny bit of this ultra positivity of God, there's nothing else this world can offer you that will satisfy you the way the God's light satisfies you. And so you're in a real test. You're in a real test. And the darkness, to know what the darkness is doing on the planet, it's been doing this for thousands of years. It governs the little positive and negatives. So you're going for the light. You're going for the light. The great moment has arisen. And here's the hardest part. Do you have any training to be in this light all the time? All the time. Can you handle 5 minutes of it? Now, guess what? God isn't judging you. Doesn't care what you did. Can you forgive everything you did to be 100% positive all the time? And God actually showed me this incredible miracle, and this may be how the very rare saints physically ascended into heaven. Physically ascended into heaven. He showed me, God showed me, I shouldn't say he, excuse me, because there is no he. It's God is the light. It's infinite. It covers the entire universe and beyond even that. God showed me that in your physical self, if you can vibrate this physically so that the positives are greater than the negatives, there's a point where you become ultra positive. This physical thing can physically disappear and go up. It becomes weightless and levitates and goes up into the sky. Now, when they go into the sky, we don't know where they're going. It's not important. They're probably going into some giant crystallized temple. You can call it a spaceship or a UFO, but it's not really the same thing. If you see Dr. Tiller's work in quantum communication, that consciousness becomes so powerful, way beyond the gamma ray spectrum, when it becomes coherent, a mind that is coherent can power a spacecraft. There is no engine, there's no propulsion system. And those are the angelic craft and angelic temples of God, and they are ultra positive. And so when you get to the point in physics where you understand, is there anything that's pure positive? There's two things. Sunlight, light, electromagnetism is positive. It has no negative charge in it as it's transmitting, But light as information, so if we put our voice, our music, or television pictures on microwaves, the receiver has to be negative ground to receive that signal, but the signal itself is pure positive. So our light, the light of our star, is actually positive. It's really positive. And in fact, the light of our star is God. I mean, and looking for the God particle, what they call the God particle, you know, the Higgs boson, is not really the God particle. It's not the mother of all particles. The mother of all particles is light. All particles will return to their origin, which is light. And then there's the super light. And the super light occurs after light gets trapped. It gets trapped and then it quantum tunnels and it becomes super light. And super light is not visible like sunlight is. It's ultra positive. And so there's a purpose. See, there's a purpose for us to be trapped in these containers, in these bodies, because we're going to eventually quantum tunnel our way out of them. By being trapped, we're going to go to a higher light. So there's a reason for the descent into duality. It's actually causes a super ascension. So what God showed me is that we were all originally created in the first light. We're all originally created in this perfect first light. So why did we fall? Because some beings who never went into duality were able to ascend very slowly into the next super light. But those who suffer and get trapped in a container eventually quantum tunnel and go into super lights. And the beings that reach super light cause an evolution of God. God evolves. God starts at this first primary level of light, and then it goes higher, and then it goes higher, and then it goes higher. That's how you get the 7 to 9 levels of God, in which are evident in all the world religions, which we'll go definitely into. And you see in the end of the voice a snippet of my experience going through the 7 levels of heaven. I can tell you, going through the 7 levels of heaven, that there is so much bliss, there's so much joy, there's so much perfection awaiting us. We're just temporarily in these bodies. We're here to become super light. So our positivity and the law of attraction stuff is really more positives that are meant to manifest fulfillment. But once you have fulfillment of all those little positives, you eventually get bored. And you can see this. You can see this in people with excessive amounts of money. It doesn't matter how much more money they manifest. It doesn't make them any happier. Some people with a lot of money are on world missions, and they're here to change things for the better for everybody else. Those are major players. There's not very many people with excessive amounts of money that are trying to change your life for the better. And we know who some of those players are in the world. And their role is very important. Teaching you how to manifest wealth and
vitamin D.
in your life, right? They're here to act as world teachers and guides so that you can have a better life. One of the worst things we do is we stagnate. Is we see our own positive negatives, but we don't choose. We don't just jump in and go for it, right? We're like, we just sit there on the fence watching the situation idle, and then you lose the opportunity. And if you become an idler and you sit on the fence and you don't jump in and engage, you're going to miss out. You're playing it safe. You feel safe because you have enough, but you're not going to jump in and actually do it, actually participate. But believe me, the way the universe works is if a person becomes too idle, the universe will throw you a curveball. It'll knock you off the fence. And so the purpose of the fall is so that out of suffering, compassion is born. And believe me, a lot of people will watch somebody else suffering and they'll have no compassion. They won't feel that wonderful feeling. Like just the other day, this happened last night. I stopped on Facebook on this picture of children sleeping under park benches that were homeless. And I thought, homeless children? You mean there's children who sleep on the street and nobody cares? And I just kept looking at them and I sent them so much fatherly love. And I thought, how can this be America today? How? How did this happen? That there's so much wealth in America and nobody will stop. Nobody will even stop to pick up a child who's sleeping under a park bench, and nobody will want to know how they got there. This is our world today. This is where we've gotten. We have more billionaires than any time in the history of the world, and yet there's children sleeping on the streets. And there's people sleeping on the streets. And the answer is starting. I saw this new housing project in Spokane, Washington. This huge apartment complex is going to offer $250 a month rent units, and they're brand new. And I see that people have bought some of the old motels and converted them into units for homeless people. And those projects are not government-led projects. They're eventually people realize that we're all in this together. You know, when you walk out on the street and you see homeless people, you're experiencing homelessness. You get to look at it every day. It's part of your life. If you live in San Francisco, where I grew up as a kid, and you go downtown, you can't walk around anywhere. They're everywhere. It's the same in Los Angeles. They're everywhere. So it's part of your life. It's to have no response at all. If you're able to make a difference, believe me, when your day comes to go into that light, it's all in you. See, when I was going into the light, God is reading my positives and my negatives. And if my physical positives get much higher than my physical negatives, I will physically leap, quantum leap. There's very, very few humans have ever done this. I've had this happen once where people saw me at a conference when I was in Sedona doing an incredible breathing meditation and trying to be at that conference because I wanted to be at that conference. And people said they saw me there and they said I spoke. And that's when you start quantum leaping, is when you physically become super positive. You can appear at 2, 3, 4, and multiple places at the same time. This is a manifestation that actually occurs because we're not as physical as you think we are. We're just atoms, and we're millions and millions of vibrations occurring in our physical self. But our spiritual self, when it's your turn to come to the light, believe me, it's God. It knows everything about you. It knows everything you did. And do you think it cares? It doesn't. It's, do you care? Do you care? Are you ready to let go of all your negatives? And even a lack of compassion is a negative. It's a negative. When you're in a position to help and you don't, that's a negative. So that's what I want you to do as an exercise for the next week. Actually get a piece of paper or get out your little, notebook, computer notebook, and go through each of your chakras. So you start at the base of the spine, sensuality, sexuality. What were your positive and negatives? Did you reject an experience you wanted to have and didn't because you thought God was going to judge you or somebody was going to judge you? So then you go to your belly center. Your belly center is where we were connected to our mother's womb and our father's energy for the 9-month period. And this is where, if we're nervous about our physical survival, we get worried here. We get worried here. You get all this buzzing in here because we're worried about survival. And that creates adrenal function, which is here to get our energy going, to get to work, to make enough money so that our life force center, it doesn't feel terrified. And believe me, many life force center people on the planet right now are absolutely terrified by the economic situation on the planet and why we decided to imprison people in this thing called economics, when every person should have a right to housing. And then we come to the heart center. We come to the adrenal center, which we just talked about. The adrenal function is to get everything going and not be stagnant. And when you come to this doer motivator center, see, this is where you see the fence sitters. You see all these experiences and opportunities that came before you, and you said yay or nay to those experiences. And then when you go, and when I mean every experience, it may be going fishing with grandpa, and you said, no, I don't want to go home. I'm going to stay on and watch things on my computer. And a lot of parents are experiencing these kind of things today, where their kids are obsessed with their devices and they don't want to do real things. And once you kick them in the butt and you take them tobogganing, like I did like 5 times in a row with my kids, they have a blast. And so all the doer motivator stuff is here. So you got to write them down. What were the things in your life you were motivated to go after that you did and you didn't? So you want to see your positives and your negatives. And then you want to see, especially when you reach middle age and you get into your older years, and older years really start at around mid-50s to 60s. I mean, my friend Marty's dad just died at 72, so 60 is definitely getting up there. But my dad's 80 years old right now, so you don't know when it's your time to be called back into the light. And then you come to your heart center and you say, did I give the love? Now, this is the hardest one. This is more difficult than any of them. The heart chakra is the hardest, because once you've fallen in love and get your heart broken, and when you fell in love, you were in this amazing euphoric state with this other person, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in love. And you experience romantic bliss, and it's wonderful. And then next thing you know, you're fighting with that person because you disagree on so much stuff. And so this is the hard part. And St. Francis did this with Jesus. St. Francis of Assisi was able to see and converse with Christ. And many of his disciples actually came upon him when he was in secret praying and saw Christ ablaze with light in front of St. Francis. There's really nobody like St. Francis. His life story is incredible because he was a partier, drank and, went to parties, girls, all of it. And then he decided to become a very austere monk and go on a mission to be with Christ. So did Christ judge him for partying and, no. All the stuff he did with girls, no, not at all. So at the moment you're ready to be with God, you just leave all that stuff behind and you're ready to go, because you're going to see that God is going to offer you way more fulfillment than any of that stuff. So Francis tells Jesus he wants to feel the suffering on the cross. And so he's the first saint to get the stigmata, the bleeding hands. And he feels the agony on the cross, and it's overwhelming for Francis to feel, as a human, to feel that pain, which means at this point in Francis's evolution, he didn't reach the supreme illuminated state that transcends the suffering of the body yet. But then Francis tells Jesus, now I want to feel all of your love that you had for humanity. This is really hard because when you get that high as a person, Francis was like, no, no, please stop, Lord, stop. This is way too much. I can't bear it. I can't bear it. So he could bear the pain in the hands and from the crucifixion, but he could not bear the love that Christ had for humanity. No way. He's crying, stop. I can't bear it. I can't bear it. I can't take it, Lord. I can't take it. You see, that is where in our spiritual lives, we don't have ecstasy training. We don't have it. It's not in the system. The church doesn't teach you how to get super high, to get ecstasy training, so that when it's your chance to go to heaven, you're not going to judge yourself out of it going, whoa, God, that's way too much love. I don't want to feel that much love for everybody around me. And I'll tell you 2 experiences I had with this. And these are in the years that Christ was appearing to me in person. One time I was given the experience of going to heaven, where in the dream, I was in the astral plane below, and it was St. Francis. He was wearing his brown robe. He came down from heaven. As he came down, I loved him more than my own father by 1,000 times. It was astounding how much love I had. And I saw him one by one picking people up who were in the astral plane, and they went up in a column of light up into heaven. And as he came near me, it was my turn. And I said, no. I had so much, you have to understand, in this moment, I had so much love for Francis as God, because he's wearing the light of God in him. So it's all one and the same. So it's not Francis, it's actually God. But Francis is saying it's your turn, and I'm saying, no, I'm not going with you, because your church is so corrupt, and what you've done to the children is so unacceptable. I'll find a different way to go to heaven. I'm not going with you. I fought him, and I did it with a sense of humor. You have to understand it, because I know I can get to God without him. I don't need Francis to get to God. But I said, I'm not going to be a product of your church, because you're not going to use me in my story meeting with Christ as an example that the church is okay in its current form, because I don't accept its current form. Its current form is immensely corrupt. And I'm not just going to be your little puppet, and you're not going to turn me into one of your saints. And I'm not going to go with you. So this happened, the next experience happened some years ago, and this is more recent. Christ appeared to me in a vision at nighttime, and as he was like a football field away from me, and he took one step towards me, and like I felt this immense compassion and love for humanity, just like Francis had to do. And then he took another step towards me. And then the closer Christ got to me, the more love for humanity I had to experience. And believe me, this is immense. It's immense. Have you ever felt so much joy and love, and you look at the people in the supermarket and you just want to leap, and you want to just tell them, oh my God, I love you all. If you did that, people would think you're crazy. You know, what is this person on? Are they drunk? Are they on drugs? And you're looking at how incredible. And in this state, as Christ took another step towards me, I saw how beautiful everybody is in their being, not physically, but in their being. Oh my God, people are just incredible, Lord. And then he took another step towards me. And as Jesus this experience went on for a long time, because he was immensely patient. And as he took another step towards me, the love for humanity was so overbearingly beautiful. I got to the point, I said, don't take another step. You can't take another step towards me. I get it. I understand. And when Christ takes another step towards you, you will feel those children sleeping on the park bench, and you will do something about it. You won't just pity them. You know, the real saints picked up the poor, they washed their feet, they washed their clothes, and they got them off the street. You know, if I wasn't a dad and dealing with my situation here, I would be doing stuff like that. I would, you know, it's a disgusting job because some of these homeless people haven't done their laundry. They're wearing dirty freaking clothes and underwear. This is what the Franciscans did. They would go to the poor, like they'd be carrying the bread back to the monastery, and before they got to the monastery, they had given it all away to the poor. And there, see, you're not doing this as an exercise. If I do this, God will bless me, kind of thing. They're in this state where they feel the poor. They're right inside their beings. They realize these are your brothers and sisters. This is your spiritual family in God. How can you not care? Because they are one and the same as you. Love thy neighbor as thyself is not an exercise. It's not something you do to pity them. They are 100% you as God. When you realize that you are the light, they are 100% you. They are 100% you. And and this is what happens with selfish rich people, is they don't get that. But do you know what happens to rich people when they get that and they reach out and they give money to rescue trafficked children? Because we know somebody wonderful who just did that, raised $17 million to go after the trafficked children. And you have to meet her and him. You have to meet them because they're people that we're in touch with. $17 million. You see, that means you're feeling it. You are feeling it. And this is how we spiritually quantum leap. The compassion raises us out of our own suffering. When you have compassion for somebody else's suffering, you raise your own, you raise yourself out of suffering. So when I used to do these 10-day Buddhist retreats where you're meditating 10 hours a day and your legs are killing you, your backs are killing you, and you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I torturing my body all day? Meditating, 12 hours a day. And in the end, you look at everybody and you have so much compassion, and this compassion wave carries itself. You don't have to kind of conjure up, I'm going to try, like the Dalai Lama says, I'm going to try to make some compassion here. How do I make the compassion? When you suffer enough and then you see somebody else suffering, the compassion is born. And when the compassion is born, it dissolves the boundary around your ego, your selfish egg. And we all have to have a certain amount of selfish egg, because if we were completely selfless, we'd probably be homeless ourselves. And I have a really good friend who was exactly like that. Every time he got money, he gave it to the poor, and then he ended up living on the street with them because he could never afford an apartment because he wanted to give everything away. But he wasn't feeling he could feel the love for humanity, but he wasn't in the bliss state yet. So that's the end of today, everyone. And we're going to start going into questions, but next week, because next week is the 15th, guess what? Next Tuesday is exactly the 22nd, which is not only the anniversary of my journey through the 7 levels of heaven in 1986, but it's the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, which has not happened for nearly 800 years on this planet. And there are scholars that believe the Star of Bethlehem was an alignment of Jupiter and Saturn. And that will be occurring exactly on the date of next Tuesday, which is also winter solstice, by the way. So how could winter solstice 2020 align perfectly the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn? I hope we have some clear weather to see it. Of course, it'll be going on for many days before they separate again. So it depends where you are on the planet, Monica. It's the 21st on one side of the planet and 22nd on the other side of the planet at the same time. So check your local. You can go to spaceweather.com and you can check for this to see wherever you live on the planet, where is the best place to see it. In the northern hemisphere, it's going to be in the west, the upper western portion of the sky. So that's next week. We'll be going very deeply into Jupiter and Saturn and the significance of those two planets in the mysticism of those two planets, and what the alignment will give us, and what an opportunity to be meditating and putting out your positive intentions in that exact moment. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for being here, and stay here as long as you can be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Daddy! You want to see our secret spot?
Yeah, where is it?